The man. St. Augustine wrapped a powerful thought in vivid imagery when he said, "God always pours His grace into empty hands." The hands of John Newton could not have been emptier. His father commanded a merchant ship and was always at sea. His mother raised him the best she could, schooling him in Scripture and sacred song. Mother and son attended a chapel near the Tower of London. In a nation in which 99% of the people were affiliated with the Church of England, Elizabeth Newton insisted upon an independent congregation. Just before his 7th birthday, John Newton lost his mother. It didn't take the old captain long to remarry and dispatch the boy to a boarding school. His was a childhood out of a Dickens novel. Unwanted children were often abandoned and abused at such schools. John left school and returned home. The elder Newton shrugged, put his young son on a ship, and began taking him along on his travels. By the age of 17, John Newton's world was the open sea. The world of the Spirit, as lovingly taught by his mother, had vanished over his horizon. For 7 years he declined into rebellion. Like some today, he mixed and matched convenient ideas to create his own religion, making a shipwreck of faith, hope, and conscience. In his own words, his delight and habitual practice was wickedness, and he neither feared God nor regarded men. In short, he was a slave to doing wickedness and delighted in sinfulness. After a short stint in the wartime Navy, Newton decided the regimented military life was not for him. He left in search of his father in the belief that his father could secure his release. It proved a futile move, as the deserter was quickly captured. He took a public beating, was stripped of his rank as midshipman, and was placed in shackles. Finally, he managed to get on an Africa-bound freighter. There in the shadow of the dark continent, John Newton sought to be lost where he could not be found. He could abandon himself to a life of dissolution. Newton took up with a Portuguese slave trader on the island of Plantain, just off Sierra Leone on the western coast. The man's African wife was hostile to her husband's new friend and forced him to eat scraps from her plate like a dog. His life and fortunes had reached low ebb. Perhaps he remembered a story his mother once read him, something about another rebellious son far from home eating among the pigs. Finally, John Newton was taken aboard a slave ship, where he was quartered with the captain. Then, in March 1748, somewhere in the North Atlantic, grace arrived. The hand of God rescued a shipwrecked soul. If it could happen to Paul on the road to Damascus, it could come to Newton on the voyage to Britannia. In Chapter 6, we'll hear more of his conversion story. 2 years later, Newton was married. But just as the storm seemed over, he began to be troubled by fits and seizures that precluded a life at sea. So he stayed home and worked as a tide surveyor at the docks of Liverpool. With plenty of time on his hands, he began to fill in the great gaps of a childhood that provided little formal education. He studied Greek, Hebrew, and Syriac. He read classic theological works in Latin, English, and French. More and more, he found himself drawn to that old book that brought memories of his mother, the Christian Scriptures. Then the people wanted a pastor. In 1754, he accepted a calling in Olney, where he would serve for 16 years. At the next church, this time in London, he served God and men for 28 years. An aging but contented man, at the age of 72, he marveled that such a wretch should not only be spared and pardoned, but reserved to the honor of preaching the gospel, which he blasphemed and renounced. He preached the gospel until the venerable age of 81. The melody, however, lingers on. The message. Man and melody, each sailed quite a journey. Newton's hymn, of course, has easily outlived him. People wonder at the power of amazing grace. What is so amazing about it? Like so many things, it defies the dissection we might give a frog in science class. We can't quite discover the secret, for the notes are the same as those on any piano. The words are transcendent, but no more so than the stanzas of any number of other hymns, Holy, 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 for example. No public relations firm has accounted for its influence. No pope or prelate has sanctified it. But there it is, a cherished piece of our lives. Some have attempted to bottle its inspiration, filter its doctrine, and reduce it to an anthem of generic wellness. Amazing grace to some is simply a greater sense of consciousness or the power of human potential, a moment of intense awareness, or experiencing the interconnectedness of all things. It is being aware of the unity of which we are all a part, or the unseen forces that are all around us. It is relinquishing the ego, achieving mental clarity, or finding spiritual illumination. For M. Scott Peck, it is hidden in the 95% of our consciousness of which we are unaware. For Judy Collins, it is letting go, bottoming out, seeing the light, turning it over, trusting the universe, breathing in, breathing out, going with the flow. For folk singer Joan Baez, it's a state I would like to be in for more than 30 seconds a day. For Pete Seeger, grace means harmony, the law of gravity throughout the universe, a kind of harmony, or the way that mathematics works. We can only imagine what John Newton would make of all this, perhaps express bewilderment over such nebulous metaphysical puffery. He would point out that his verses do no more and no less than tell the old, old story, the one that never grows old. They tell of the loving Father and the lost Son. They speak of the incredible joy of salvation from the clutches of sin, of the amazingness of grace.